Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Claire Jones, if we haven't already met. I'm an author and small publisher committed to changing the world for the better through inclusive stories and practices. And we are jumping on today for my Authorvision Facebook Live series, where I interview the amazing and inspiring authors in my network to discuss the personal visions that have shaped our lives and careers. So if you're joining us, please comment, like, subscribe, or share. Comment, like, share, all of those options. And let us know that you're here. And today I'm talking to Elisabeth. I'm so glad to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here, Claire. Thanks for putting out that invitation on the SFWC Discord. I was like, oh, this will be a great chance to chat.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great community, right? Like, I found so many amazing people through that community, and I am just so glad that you stepped up to show your face on this podcast as well.
Of course. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I just got back from Yellowstone, so I'm a little bit like overwhelmed by awesome nature and a long drive.
I feel that. I have a very full schedule this week, and it feels like my brain is going in a million different directions, but I am very happy to be having this conversation because these episodes usually ground me into the moment, and I just always walk away with something incredibly insightful. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive on in. Tell us, how did you get to where you are today?
So let's see. I came kind of the circuitous route to where I am, where I am is right now I'm a writer and also a book coach and an editor. Those are the things that I do for a living, just helping people get their stories out in the world, working on getting my own stories out into the world. But I went to school for English, didn't really know what to do with it after I got done with school. So I did about 10 years as an admin assistant because I'm really good at organizing and, staying on top of things. And I kind of hated it. It wasn't fulfilling. Some people love it, and I love that for them too. But I just was I wasn't bored. I just wanted to be an expert at something. So after about 10 years of that, I finally got an opportunity to just kind of take a break from that. And while I was taking a break, I read somebody's blog where they talked about this internship they were doing with an agent after they got out of school. And I was like, oh, I wish I had done that. That would have been such a good thing for me to do. I could get into publishing. And I was like, we were living in Connecticut at the time. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything right now. Maybe I can get an internship and learn some things about publishing. So I applied and I worked with an agent in Manhattan for a few months. And then I switched over and got an internship with a publishing company with Source Books, Casablanca, their romance imprint, actually, and learned so much about publishing. And it was really fun. And actually, I had never read romance before I did this internship. So I learned a lot about the romance genre, about how those stories come together. Also broke a whole lot of maybe prejudices that I had against the genre, because it's so much fun, and just so much cool stuff goes on in romance. And so after doing that for a while, then I was like, publishing has this weird aspect of really needing to be able to sell a book, right? It's working on figuring out what the market is and going to those, different execs and being able to sell this book and in such a way that they give the author a good advance. And then also that book hopefully gets enough marketing support that it's gonna sell in, bookstores. And I don't like it. I don't like that much marketing. I don't like that much my own career, I guess, and my author's careers being hinged on how well we can market this book. But I love stories. I love telling, helping people tell their stories and get their point across, and being able to see that aha moment of oh, this is the way that I want to do it, or look at this thing that I'm proud to have created. So after I did my internships, and I was like, okay, but maybe directly being involved in traditional publishing is not for me. What can I do? Then I was like, I can be an editor, because I read the slush pile, right? That was my job as an intern, was to read all of those unsolicited manuscripts that came in to read the submissions and to send a lot of rejection emails.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, for a lot of them, I was like, if people had just like worked with somebody beforehand, they wouldn't be getting a rejection right now. They'd be getting an acceptance, right? And so I was like, that's where my heart is. That's what I want to be involved in. And so I started freelance editing. That was a decade ago, more than a decade ago now, that I just was like, let me help. Let me come in and help authors be better at telling their stories, be more clear, be more concise, be more magical in it. And it just like, that's what fulfills me. So
yeah, I absolutely love that. I mean, there's so much I relate to that story. Like, you know, the 10 years of admin, like, oh my God, is that relatable?
Right?
I was like, oh my God, you're giving me flashbacks.
We all have to go through it. It's, you know,
yeah.
you know, 10 years of admin, it's 10 years of something else before you're like, oh,
yeah. I mean, like
what
so many hours of just sitting at a desk with nothing to do because I finished everything I needed to do within the first 2 hours of my workday. Like, man, I was like, in all of those jobs, I was like, I'm only using 30% of my capability in these jobs. Like, do you realize that I'm your best employee and I'm only using 30% of my capability?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
That leaves 70% of me just like flailing around because I have no direction to point these motivations, these skill sets toward. And of course, I didn't have like the energy at the end of the workday to do anything more either. So you're just stuck in this like unfulfillment cycle of like being the best person in the office and like being like, yeah, I can do this in my sleep, y'all. Like,
I mean, I've had multiple bosses that, you know, they cried when I left because, you know, I was good at my job, and I'm like, yes, and also I hate it here.
Yeah. I want to pluck my eyeballs out every time I sit down at my desk.
In there.
And I love that you mentioned this whole like 10-year thing, because I'm like developing this theory on how there has to kind of be a 10-year incubation period for authors.
It's true.
Like we start putting those like initial steps out, you know, in the beginning, and then it just takes 10 years to germinate for one reason or another. Like A, you just keep getting rejected over and over and over and over and over again for those 10 years, or like B, you get distracted by something else for those 10 years. Or, you know, like something happens within that 10 years, you have kids, you know, like whatever that is, it's just there has to be this like 10-year period.
I kind of agree. Yeah. I think that there's like cycles like that. And, you know, part of it is just developing the confidence that we need to be able to like put ourselves out there. And then part of it is just kind of waiting for stories to emerge, right? And some people like, you know, they're like putting stories out there, but they have their 10 years somewhere else, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this lately because I hear, like you said, from a lot of different authors that they hate the marketing part of it. And I am more and more grateful, like each and every day, that I spent the 10 years on marketing.
Fair. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like building that platform and being able to not stress. Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, I know what I'm doing with marketing and no one else does.
Well, and like part of it comes down to like, if you can do it and not need your creative work to hinge on that marketing, that's probably easier. So then you do have to build that like foundation, you know, which it sounds like you have done in spades, you know.
Somehow, some way, like it wasn't my intention, honestly. Like, 10 years felt like me flailing around some more, you know, of jumping from one thing to another and getting distracted and trying again. But I think as I look back, it's more like I was really unconsciously attempting to find a way to have my creativity drive my work, but I just couldn't find the right application for it.
Right.
And so all along the way, I focused on the more practical things, you know, work in business and like, you know, focus on profit and like, you know, do all this like suited up business people stuff, you know, and at the end of that, I was like, okay, fair. I learned a lot, you know, good on me. But at the same time, my soul is also dying. So I need to somehow put them together.
Yeah, It's part of that whole being in a society, a capitalist society, where we need money in order to survive, and also like we need creativity in order to survive. So like how do you balance, especially in a world where like AI is taking over and like doing the creative stuff that we're like, excuse me, like that's what makes us human. Can we please have that? Like,
so many thoughts on AI. I actually
believe you.
did a post about it earlier today, so that's just really funny that you brought it up. I'm not going to derail us though. So.
No. Sorry, I was like, oh, as soon as I said it, I was like, whoa.
I'm like, that's a whole other podcast.
Let's have a series on that.
So, I mean, that begs the next question is like, what personal visions kept you going along this journey?
Yeah, I think largely it's just about, for me, it's about, well, when I look at the people that I work with, it's about helping people have the confidence I need to be able to tell their story, whatever that story is, whether it's, whether it's, your lightest fluff piece of fantasy, or whether it's something that like has really deep themes that are, hitting hard in like, talking about trans and queer identities, in talking about, political identities, things like that, building worlds where we are able to articulate a vision that we have for how we want to be, right? So like I have a couple of short stories that are coming out soon, and one of them is a little bit darker and harder and has to do with some domestic violence and things like that. But then like I have this other series that I've been working on, and I had somebody read it recently, to give me some critique on it, and just talked about how gentle the world is that I created. And it's like a cozy fantasy. It has, witches that are just kind of doing their thing in the small town that they live in, and maybe creating, meals for people that accidentally have magic properties to them, or, digging up their crusty old mean ants like amulet because they need, this extra power, things like that. But largely the world is very soft, right? It's like, it's cozy, and there's places for people to land, and it's not like there's not danger around every corner. And especially in kind of the society we live in today, like I want to find space where I can feel safe, where I can feel comfortable, where I can be myself. And so I write those. That's what I enjoy.
I love that. I've been noticing that trend, honestly, a lot lately, like the cozy fantasy trend. Like, I find it absolutely fascinating. I haven't read much cozy fantasy, to be honest, but I did read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree.
Yeah, I've heard. I actually haven't read it yet, but I had.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the most well-known out of the cozy fantasy genre at the moment. And like, I honestly couldn't get into it. Like, it was a very cute story. I loved it, but the story hinges around the protagonist starting a business and coming from the business world. I was just like,
you're like, no, something else.
I was like, you're building a business off of friendship and a magic rock, and I cannot like suspend my disbelief for this story in this moment. But I think there's something very valid in our desire for that kind of stuff. Like, something that I realized too about the books that I was reading is that I see more and more focus too on, like, in my head, I call them playing dress up scenes. Like, you put on the fancy ball gown and you talk about like the fancy jewelry that you get to wear and the tiara, or like the magic wand that you get, or like whatever those scenes are in those books. And like, instead of just saying like she wore a red dress, it's like she wore a red dress that sparkled like the night sky, like,
right, you get into the embroidery and the like the deep details.
Yeah, and like, the more I was thinking about it, the more I was like, it's just giving us some like imaginary dress up time. Like, it's just giving us that thing that we love to do as kids, of like putting on our mom's dresses and wearing the high heels around the house. And like, we need that type of escapism, especially in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. And especially in the fantasy series too. I mean, romance, I feel like, has been doing that for years, right? Like decades.
Absolutely.
Upon decades. But like this, just adding it in other places where, and where maybe the stakes are just lower, right? It's like, we're just like, we're building friendships here. It's not, doesn't have to be hot and steamy, it's just kind of, here's a little world and here's how we get to be in it.
I heard very fascinating discourse piece the other day about how dystopian fiction is kind of on its way out.
Yeah.
Because of a variety of reasons. Like,
I mean,
one,
we've kind of lived through the dystopia.
we've lived through the dystopia. And two, the, big name media companies have kind of tried to like capitalize dystopian stories as well. And so, which kind of defeats the purpose of dystopian stories.
Right, exactly. Because it's about the breakdown of capitalism. So, like,
yeah. And like, I think we're in this really pivotal moment when it comes to storytelling and how people use stories as ways to give them the emotions that they want to have.
Right. Yeah.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually a thing that I talk to my clients about too, is like, when you've been writing on a thing for a while and suddenly you like lose your track and you're like, oh, I don't even know what this story is supposed to be about anymore. Like, coming back to that, I call it revision, right? Revision your story. Like what was the original vision you had? And like, then is that where your story is headed? No. Okay, let's talk about like how you can get back on track with it, or let's talk about the new direction it's taking, but like thinking about what is that feeling you want to leave people with at the end? What is the thought, the idea that like when they finish the story, they're like, I see the good in people.
Yes.
Or,
I can be a better person now, or whatever that, emotional experience is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but like, what lessons have you learned along this journey?
Well, I mean, there's that of like, just like really thinking about what is it that I'm trying to say? What am I leaving? For me, a lot of what I've learned, well, especially with the technologies that have come out since I started doing the work that I do, is that like, I don't need somebody else's permission to tell my story, right? Like, I can do it my way, and I can take that initiative and do that thing. And that has been a big one, because I mean, I grew up in a super conservative, very repressed background, where like everything you had to ask permission for, right? Like, I was not allowed to have my own thoughts. So yeah. So then like coming out of that and like really learning how to step out and how to be the one that says, no, I'm allowed to do this. No, this is what I mean to say right now. So that's been kind of freeing, just being in that space. So
yeah, I mean, technology has democratized communication and
for sure. Yeah.
knowledge distribution.
For sure. Like, I mean, it's done, some like scary shit.
Totally.
But
I mean, there's scary information out there, and it is now being widely distributed.
yeah. But also it does give us that power. It puts that power in our hands.
Yeah. And I think the good information does outweigh the bad information that's out there, I think. But I think more, I mean, I hate using terms like good and bad anyway. It's such a dichotomy, but like for ease of access when it comes to talking about this stuff, I think if more good people show up and tell their stories, it's definitely going to combat those floods of ickiness that we get from.
Yeah. And I mean, it gives us access to, I mean, like, we would not have met if it weren't for technology.
Absolutely.
And so like, there's definitely ways that like, if you have a story to tell, you might think you're unique, that you're the only one who's ever felt this way. But as soon as you put it out there, there's somebody else that's going to say, oh, me too. Right. And they're like, even if it's not exactly what your story is, there's some aspect that resonates with them. And that's how you find your people, right? You find that you're not alone, and that other people have either been through or are going through similar things to what you've been through, and resonate with that. And that's just so important in the end.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword too at the end of the day, because like, you're afraid to put yourself out there because you don't want to be criticized, diminished, disregarded, like we tend to be throughout our lives by people in our lives. But then at the same time, you have to put yourself out there in order to find the people who don't want to dismiss you and disregard you and stuff like that. And so it takes a lot of guts, grit, whatever you want to classify it as, in order to take that step.
It's true. And that's why community is just so important for that too. Finding
Mhm.
people you trust in the first place,
Mhm.
that support you, and then like going from there and
Mhm.
reaching out further and further. So
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting. I talk to a lot of people who like are afraid to show up on social media, are afraid to show their faces, are afraid to like show all of the weird facets of themselves. And I'm like, that's what's going to attract people to you,
it's
though.
true.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I have anxiety, like
mm,
generalized anxiety disorder, and
okay.
like uh it manifests in a lot of different ways, some of them very physical in my body. And I think though that once I was able to start talking about it more,
Mm,
then like people A, had more empathy for what I was going through, or B, they were like, oh my God, I have anxiety too, and we can alleviate it for each other, right? Because we're like, okay, you feel anxious, I feel anxious, it's showing up in these ways, so we're gonna slow down, we're gonna make sure we hydrate, we're gonna like take time, or sure, you need to cancel tonight, that's great, like do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But like keeping it in, it's that same thing that you were just talking about. If you're too afraid to like be vulnerable, then you miss out between like just the community, but also just for people to be able to support you and like and come around you and like help you get where you need to go, or get what you need to feel safe and comfortable. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this also begs the next question is like, what tools or practices did you use to stay sane, to support yourself during this journey?
yeah, for sure. It's definitely been about like building my support group, right? And like having people in my life that I can trust to say, hey, I'm going through something right now and I need
Yeah.
this amount of things in order to be able to be comfortable.
Yeah.
It's taking breaks. There's definitely that tool of like not listening to what everybody says about like, if you're a real writer, you do these things, right? Because that will mess with your head so bad. And when you have moments like what I've been going through recently, where you absolutely can't do anything except for focus on your physical needs at the moment,
Mm.
then suddenly you're like, oh no, I'm not a real writer because I didn't do whatever the list of things is that you think you're
Sure.
supposed to do,
Mhm.
And like, we need to take breaks. We need to give ourselves space. We need to be able to like recharge and, fill up creatively too. And sometimes that looks way differently than what anybody else is out there telling us are the 8 magical ways to get to, be a
Yeah.
successful author.
Yeah. 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 I mean, there's no formula for success, right?
Not at all. Yeah.
Like,
Everybody is so different. Yeah.
yeah, we all bring different experiences to the table. We all bring different skill sets to the table. We all bring different viewpoints to the table. And it's going to be a magical combination of those that bring you success rather than someone like decreeing a formula and forcing you into a cookie cutter.
I mean, if it was as easy as like finding the formula, like
Right?
we would be done by now.
Yeah, like if the formula existed, we still wouldn't have the starving artist stereotype.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so yeah, there's like, I guess that's the other tool, is just that mantra of like, it takes as long as it takes, and I'm
Yes.
doing everything I should be doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Which really stems from the foundational like belief in self, right?
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about that in terms of when we were talking about the push to get over that double-edged sword is
Right.
like you have to have some base level of confidence or belief in yourself in order to take that leap.
Yeah.
And that is hard to build sometimes, like I'm one of those people that definitely faked it till I made it. Like,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's valid. That's not the wrong way to do it
Definitely not the wrong
either.
way.
Like I can shame myself for putting on these facades over the, whatever span of my life you want to look at. But
Right.
at the same time, like I was doing what I felt I needed to do. And I also learned a lot from that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever the path is that you take, like
Mm-hmm.
there's something you can take with you on the way. And
Yeah.
and however fast you go is definitely your speed. So like some, I know I have one author friend who's, almost to 200 books that she's like
Wow.
published. So I'm like super happy for her. And also like my first full length book doesn't exist yet, except for, I wrote a tarot deck and guide. And like, so I've published one thing, but like, in other areas, I'm like, I don't know, I have short stories that are coming out. But like, it's slower for me than it is for other people. And I have to be okay with that, because otherwise I'm just gonna like be in a ball on the floor going, oh my God, I haven't done what I'm supposed to do yet.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite phrases that I've had to adopt over the years is I learn something from everything,
Yes,
even if it's what not to do.
correct.
Like I had to really repeat that mantra when I was going through like my whole business consulting days, when I was stuck on a lot of networking calls that felt like they were sucking my soul out of my body. I was like, okay, I can at least learn what not to do in this scenario, even if it feels like I just wasted an hour of my time talking to this individual. I can also like walk away and be like, okay, note for future, this is what I can look out for to avoid that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have to create these mantras for ourselves, because it's again unique to our situation too. It's like what mantra is actually going to get you through it too.
Yeah. And just like coming back to the idea that you're more than the output of whatever it is you're doing. So whether you write one book or 200 books in your life, like you're still valuable. Your voice still matters. And somebody out there needs whatever story it is that you have to tell. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a perfect note to end on. So anything you want to add before we wrap up for that?
No, I think that sums me up right there.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Put that on a plaque, please.
Exactly.
This is powerful stuff per usual, and audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own stories and insights and thoughts with us as well. These usually end up feeling like little mini therapy sessions, and I'm totally here for it. So we'd love to know how personal visions like these have impacted you in your own lives, because I'm sure there's something within this episode that you can find relatable, if not inspirational. So special thanks for Elisabeth for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. I mean, always a good conversation. So please like, comment, subscribe, check out linktr.ee/clairjoyance for my links. And then where can folks find out more about you?
You can find me at writingrefinery.com or at elisabethkauffman.com, both places. Eventually they're going to merge. They just haven't quite yet. I do have a couple short stories coming out in November and October via Wild Blood magazine and Illustrated Worlds magazine. So check those out if you like cozy fantasy, because that's mostly the genre that I am enjoying right now. And you can find me on Instagram for what that's worth, Fair Betty.
Yes, and I'll make sure all the links are in the description and stuff for easy access, because we all need a little bit of coziness these days.
Too true.
All right, until next time, please remember that you all have extraordinary stories inside of you, and I'm rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, guys.